Now, consciousness isn't just about being awake, sleeping, and dreaming, but it includes a spectrum of other states induced by various means. It encompasses states from waking thought to divided attention, daydreaming, and mind wandering. It also includes dreaming states, disassociation, different levels of unconsciousness, and a complete lack of awareness. But speaking of ranges of consciousness, what boundaries do we have when we consider what consciousness is? And are humans the only conscious species on the planet? In essence, do animals have consciousness? So if you have a pet, would you say that they were conscious of themselves? And if so, how would you actually know?
Hi, and welcome to the Daily Thunk. I'm Alan, and in today's episode we're asking the question, are animals self-aware? People have always found animals fascinating, and it's easy to get lost in all the different ways they're able to do things. But one question that's always fascinated people is whether or not animals have a sense of self. For example, if you see a dog, does it think, hey, there's my head? Or does it just think about its own paws? Does a cat know it has fur? Or does it just feel warmth on its body without having any idea why? Is there an animal out there who knows that they are alive and have thoughts? To answer this question, we need to look at two things. First, how much do animals seem like they're aware of their own existence compared with other species, including humans? And second, can we measure this kind of awareness by testing them in some way? There are lots of ways scientists can test animals' thoughts to determine whether or not they're conscious beings. From studying how much empathy they show towards others, which humans do but many other animals don't, to seeing if they're able to learn tricks quickly. Dogs excel here. We've also got some pretty good ideas about which species show signs of being self-aware thanks to tests like these. Some people say that a creature needs to be able to think about itself in order for it to be considered self-aware. Others think it's only necessary for an animal to recognize itself in the mirror or through another form of reflection. Still others claim that just being able to learn your name is sufficient evidence of self-awareness, while others will argue this isn't enough, and you have to have some kind of concept or understanding of yourself as something separate from other things around you. In other words, they believe animals need consciousness in order for them not only know themselves, but also realize their own existence. So what constitutes consciousness? Does seeing yourself in a mirror count as consciousness? Or does having an abstract concept about yourself count instead? And how do we know if other animals, or even plants, possess these abilities too? The most common test for self-awareness is the mirror test, where animals that recognize their reflection usually show signs of thinking it's another animal or another version of themselves. For example, if you mark and then shave one side of a monkey's forehead and put him in front of a mirror, he won't see the marking on his face. But if he has his own reflection, he'll try to groom that spot as if there was some kind of foreign object on his head. In other words, it seems like the monkey thinks there's an other monkey staring back at him, one with a strange growth on its skull. This doesn't prove that monkeys have human-level intelligence or social awareness. They might just be able to recognize objects. But it does suggest something about how monkeys view themselves and interact with others. We can never really know for sure whether or not animals are self-aware because we can't measure consciousness. However, we do know that humans have a strong sense of self, a feeling that there's an I in our identity. And it seems likely that other animals do too. In fact, lots of experiments show that animals have some kind of awareness or sense of themselves as individuals. Dogs recognize their own scent on objects, and birds sing different songs when they're alone than when they're around others, and learn which song is theirs. These kinds of behaviors suggest that animals have at least some idea about what it means to be an individual and how to communicate with other individuals. Animals are fascinating, and it's exciting to think they might be self-aware. but we'll probably never know for sure. It's hard enough to prove that we humans are self-aware. Maybe that's why people have always loved pets so much. They remind us of our own animalistic nature without being too different from us at the same time. What do you think about this? Do you think some animals are self-aware? What about plants and insects? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. And don't forget to click the like button on your way down there. We publish new short videos every weekday, so please subscribe so that we'll get to meet you again in our next video.
Though it's hard to say definitively whether animals have consciousness, there is compelling evidence suggesting that many animals exhibit behaviors indicative of awareness, also self-recognition and emotional responses. Nonetheless, transitioning back to human states of consciousness, in these final few slides, we'll highlight some of the altered states of consciousness, ranging from mild to profound. But keep in mind when we discuss my scaling, it's subjective. Before we finalize talking about mind, we'll look at Crash Course Psychology's explanation of altered states of consciousness.
Let me get your mind right about hypnosis. First of all, it's a real thing, but it's probably not what you think it is. All kinds of hypnosis-esque practices have been around for centuries, but the Western version of it, including the kind that you probably associate with people being made to cluck like chickens on stage, cropped up around the 18th century. That's when German physician Franz Mesmer started treating all manner of medical problems by putting patients into a trance-like state, during which he claimed to align their internal magnetic forces, which he called animal magnetism. And many of these mesmerized patients did feel better, but not because of any magnetism or whatever. Mesmer was inadvertently using the healing power of suggestion. In addition to his magnetic quackery, other physicians didn't appreciate Mesmer's kitschy penchant for wearing capes and playing ethereal music on a glass harmonica, and eventually he was discredited. So, were his patients just gullible idiots, or was there something else going on? Well, we've previously defined consciousness as our awareness of ourselves and our environment, and consciousness is at work pretty much whenever we're awake, but also while we're asleep and dreaming. So hypnosis is a good example of an altered state of consciousness, when you're fully conscious in a clinical sense, but also not what you'd consider a normal waking state. As a person who considers himself the product of only one of several states of consciousness, this one that I am currently in right now, it's worth pointing out how tremendously weird this is. My brain has like other gears that it drops into, in which I become, in a sense, not me anymore. Altered states can also include things like hallucinations and the effects of psychoactive drugs, but these states aren't as uncommon as you might think. In fact, you've probably experienced an altered state yourself, even if you've never taken an illicit drug or been to a cheesy dinner theater where the main act wore a glittering turban. So personal opinions of Mesmer aside, here are some facts and fallacies worth knowing about hypnosis. First off, let's define hypnosis simply as a calm, trance-like state during which you tend to have a heightened concentration and focus, and in which you're typically more open to suggestion. The phenomenon has been observed in lots of empirically rigorous studies, and it's been used effectively in treatments for stress and anxiety, weight loss, and chronic pain. But it's important to understand that even though you're more open to suggestion when you're hypnotized, you do not lose control over your behavior. So contrary to what you might see in The Manchurian Candidate or Zoolander, hypnosis can't make you act totally against your will and say jump off a building, rob a donut shop, or commit a murder most foul. Nor is hypnosis a reliable way to enhance the recall of deeply buried memories. We don't file away every single one of our experiences. We only permanently store some of them, and even they tend to mutate over time. We'll be talking more about that in an upcoming lesson. Finally, only about 20% of us are thought to be highly hypnotizable. Those are the folks whom a hypnotist could get to smile at the smell of sour milk just by suggesting it was rosewater. And even though we know hypnosis can increase your suggestibility, there's still some disagreement about what exactly constitutes a hypnotic state, or how it's achieved. Remember, just because we observe a phenomenon doesn't mean that we have a clue about its mechanisms of action, or whether it works the way we think it works. One popular theory looks at hypnosis as a phenomenon of social influence. This camp suggests that, like actors caught up in an intense role, hypnotized subjects may begin to feel and act like good hypnotic subjects, if they just trust their hypnotist to sort of act like a director and focus their attention. Other researchers suggest that it has more to do with a special dual processing state of split consciousness called dissociation. Dissociation is a sort of detachment from your surroundings, which can range from mild spacing out all the way up to total loss of your sense of self. It's something that we all do to some degree or another, and we're often quite aware that we're doing it. It's not hard to think of instances where dissociation might help us, like when we're faced with a dangerous situation that requires quick, reflexive action and not a ton of focus on our thoughts and feelings. In this way, hypnosis may ease pain not by magically blocking pain receptors, but by helping us selectively not attend to that pain. Clinicians can do this by basically guiding the patient into a very relaxed but voluntary state, sort of spaced out, and then further guiding them through a series of positive thoughts and suggestions. So in legitimate clinical hypnosis, people aren't being made to dissociate. Instead, think of them as being asked to dissociate. And some people are just better at that than others, which is essentially what being highly hypnotizable means. So clearly, there is a lot going on in our two-track brains at any given time, and hypnosis, as researchers understand it, seems to help us tap into some of that adaptive dissociative capacity that we all seem to have. But say you're not so into the idea of someone feeding you suggestions. Probably the most classic way to voluntarily enter an altered state of consciousness is by using drugs. Most of us have used some kind of legal drug, your morning coffee, some Tylenol PM to put you to bed, and lots of folks responsibly use prescription and non-prescription drugs. But of course, some people develop problems. The more you use a substance, legal or illegal, the less you feel its effects as your tolerance grows. And soon enough, a 2-beer buzz turns into a 4-beer buzz, or a case of beer buzz. That's your brain chemistry adapting to offset the drug effect in a process called neuroadaptation. Keep on that road and soon you'll risk a physical and or psychological addiction to the substance you choose, or the substance that chose you. And that's not even to mention serious physiological and neurological damage as happens with severe and long-term alcohol abuse. We'll be delving more deeply into the science of addiction in an upcoming episode, but for now, let's take a look at some of these drug families and how they jack you up, knock you out, make you do dumb things, see imaginary stuff, and generally alter your consciousness. Psychoactive drugs are chemical substances that alter your mood and perception. They're the ones that go right to your brain's synapses, mimicking the functions of neurotransmitters. They also work by tapping into the psychological component. In other words, the user's expectation about what the substance might mean. Like, if you really believe that drinking tequila makes you more aggressive, and I give you a virgin margarita, your expectation of getting all surly and aggro may actually lead you to punch someone in the neck. That's what's called the placebo effect. Whether smoked, snorted, ingested, or injected, we'll put all of them into 3 general categories: depressants, stimulants, and hallucinogens. Depressants, like alcohol, tranquilizers, and opiates, do exactly what you'd expect. They bring the mellow, slow body functions and suppress neural activity. Historically, the world's favorite depressant is alcohol. Beat writer William S. Burroughs even called it our national drug. A little bit of hooch may get the party started, but not because it's stimulating anyone. Rather, it's acting as a disinhibitor, impairing your brain's judgment areas while reducing your self-awareness and self-control. And then, because alcohol disrupts memory formations, you may wake up wondering where one of your eyebrows went. Similar to booze, tranquilizers, or barbiturates depress nervous system activity and may be prescribed to ease anxiety or insomnia, though high doses can negatively affect memory and judgment. And really high doses or bad interactions with other substances like alcohol can kill you. Opiates, like poppy flower superstar opium and its derivatives morphine and heroin, work in a similar way, depressing neural activity and enveloping the brain in a fog of no-pain bliss. The thing is, if a brain keeps getting flooded with outside opiates, it will eventually stop brewing its own natural pain-killing neurotransmitters, endorphins. The resulting withdrawal is particularly nasty. Stimulants obviously excite rather than suppress neural activity and speed up body functions, bringing up your energy, self-consciousness, and changing your mood. On the legal end of the spectrum here, we've got caffeine, nicotine, and prescription amphetamines, building up to the more serious illegal stuff like street amphetamines, meth, ecstasy, and cocaine. And you know who loved his coke? Freud. He loved it so much. It cheered him up when he was feeling down, opened his mind, and turned him into a bit of a chatty Cathy. He even wrote his first big publication, Uber Coca, in 1884 about it. During his famous coke years in his late 20s and 30s, he believed that the drug was a viable cure for morphine addiction, which not so much. Luckily, he gave his nose a rest and finally dropped the habit by his 40s to focus full-time on his cigar addiction, which is the thing that ultimately killed him. Cocaine hits the bloodstream in a flash of energetic euphoria that quickly taxes the brain's supply of dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. Methamphetamine also triggers the release of dopamine. You'll remember from our lesson on neurotransmitters how these chemical messengers affect our moods, emotions, attention, and alertness, so when those neurotransmitters are excessively activated, they can become temporarily depleted, which is what causes that agitative, depressive crash that users often feel. If you drink coffee every morning and then you skip a day, you'll likely be tired and cranky with a pounding headache. Now multiply that awful feeling by like thousands and you'll see why people with coke and meth addictions might keep chasing that high while their bodies and lives fall apart around them. In addition to depressants and stimulants, we've got hallucinogens, which come in a variety of plant and fungal forms, as well as synthetic forms like LSD or lysergic acid diethylamide. Also called psychedelics, these drugs distort perceptions and evoke sensory images in the absence of actual sensory input, which means you could end up seeing, hearing, smelling, or feeling things that are not real. This could be quite nice if you're like petting a baby dolphin or something, but it could also be panic-inducing and generally messed up if you think you got a bunch of centipedes crawling around under your skin. The thing is, there are lots of ways to involuntarily hallucinate without the use of drugs. Seizures, brain injuries, diseases, sensory deprivation, fever, stress, or even extreme grief or depression can all cause neurological disturbances that spur hallucinations of one kind or another. Many healthy people have reported experiencing vivid auditory hallucinations when in emergencies, like you broke your knee skiing and you wanted to just fall asleep forever in that blanket of soft snow, but a strong, seemingly audible voice ordered you to keep moving. And bizarrely, it isn't uncommon for people who lose the use of one sense, like vision or smell, to perceive sights and odors that they are no longer capable of sensing as their brains pull from old memories to produce hallucinations as a way to compensate for that loss. All of this just goes to show that whether you're a psychologist, a neuroscientist, or a philosopher, our various states of consciousness provide a rich, complex world of inquiry to contemplate, showing yet again just what a messy and marvelous thing the human mind is. If your consciousness wasn't too altered today, you learned what hypnosis is and what it can and can't do, how psychoactive depressant, stimulant, and hallucinogenic drugs work on the brain, and how non-drug-induced hallucinations can happen to anyone. Thanks for watching, especially to all of our subbable subscribers who make this whole channel possible.
So that video highlighted primarily hypnosis and substance-induced altered states of consciousness. So in these last few slides, I'm going to kind of break them down in their levels of, awareness and intensities. So as I said, these are subjective to my interpretation of them. However, the first level we're going to look at is mild alterations of consciousness that may involve subtle shifts in our awareness and perception. Hypnagogia and hypnopompia are two such states, and they occur in the twilight zones between sleep and wakefulness. So you've probably experienced these as vivid sensory experiences, imagery, or even hallucinations in your transition stages. As the video discussed, hypnosis, on the other hand, is a more intentional state. It's characterized by focused attention, heightened suggestibility, and deep relaxation. Meditation is another mild alteration that many people practice. It's a state of deep relaxation and heightened awareness, often used for stress reduction and spiritual growth. And then there's flow state, where we become so absorbed in an activity that we lose track of time and experience a sense of euphoria from the task we're performing. Moving on to moderate alterations, we encounter states that are more pronounced and can significantly impact our experience of reality. Trance states are often induced through rhythmic activities, rituals, or social interactions, and they can lead to a sense of dissociation or detachment, sometimes associated with spiritual or religious experiences. Psychedelic experiences, on the other hand, are those induced by substances like LSD or psilocybin or DMT, and these substances can profoundly alter perception, cognition, and emotional states. Lucid dreaming is another interesting example. It's a state where we're aware that we're dreaming, can sometimes control the dream's narrative. And then hallucinations, again, are a common feature of some altered states. They involve perceiving things that actually aren't present. And fugue state is a dissociative state where individuals may suddenly travel and forget their personal identity or past events. That's quite a rare phenomenon. And finally, we come to the most profound alterations of consciousness. And these states often involve a significant change in perception, cognition, and even a sense of self. One is the out-of-body experiences. Have you ever experienced one of these? These are quite a fascinating phenomenon where individuals feel as though they've separated from their physical bodies. I know the first time I experienced one, I remember standing up, getting off the floor, standing up and looking down, and there I was laying there on the floor. But there I was standing there looking at myself laying on the floor, and it was quite intense. Near-death experiences are often involve profound spiritual or mystical experiences. They're often reported by individuals who have been close to death. And finally, a coma represents a complete loss of consciousness, and it's a prolonged state where individuals are unresponsive to external stimuli. These profound alterations can be deeply transformative and raise many questions about the nature of consciousness and human experience in general. So I want to thank you so much for tuning into my presentation on Chapter 4 on consciousness.